Good morning. Thank you for joining me this day. This morning we'll be in Mark chapter 2, verse 13 through chapter 3, verse 6. Jesus went out again by the sea. The whole crowd came to him, and he taught them. As he went along, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax booth. "Follow me," he said to him, and he got up and followed him. As Jesus was having a meal in Levi's home, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the experts in the law and the Pharisees saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When Jesus heard this, he said to them, "Those who are healthy don't need a physician, but those who are sick do. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, so they came to Jesus and said, "Why do the disciples of John and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples don't fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they do not fast. But the days are coming when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and at that time they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, otherwise the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and the tear becomes worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the skins will be destroyed. Instead, new wine is poured into new wineskins." Jesus was going through the grain fields on a Sabbath, and his disciples began to pick some heads of wheat as they made their way. So the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is against the law on the Sabbath?" He said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he was in need? And he and his companions were hungry, how he entered the house of God, when Abiathar was high priest, and ate the sacred bread, which is against the law for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to his companions? Then he said to them, The Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. For this reason the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." Then Jesus entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand. And they watched Jesus closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they could accuse him. So he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Stand up among all these people." Then he said to them, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath, or evil, to save a life, or destroy it?" But they were silent. After looking around at them in anger, grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. So the Pharisees went out immediately and began plotting with the Herodians as to how they could assassinate him. Yeah, regarding the supposed low Christology of the Mark Gospel, here you have Jesus, who says to them, as he was going through the grain fields on a Sabbath, and his disciples began to pick some heads of wheat. No, that wasn't it. Yeah. "Why do the disciples of John and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples don't fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they do not fast. But the days are coming when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and at that time they will fast." So Jesus claims by his very presence that the standard rules of fasting are no longer in effect, that his coming is somehow a joyous event, and such that it, yeah, it puts a temporary break on fasting, which this is one that C.S. Lewis likes to point at, that this would be an enormous bit of cheek for Jesus if he wasn't God. So, yeah. Yet nobody gets the idea that Jesus is some egomaniacal man or crazy from saying this. Let me think here. So he says to Levi, son of Alphaeus, follow me. Levi, also known as Matthew, in Matthew 9:9, was a tax collector. In that day, tax collectors were despised as traitors and extortioners. The Jewish people rightly considered them traitors because they worked for the Roman government and had the force of Roman soldiers behind them to make people pay taxes. They were the most visible Jewish collaborators with Rome. The Jewish people rightly considered them extortioners because they could keep whatever they over-collected. A tax collector bid, among others, for the tax collecting contract. For example, many tax collectors might want to have the tax contract for a city like Capernaum. The Romans awarded the contract to the highest bidder. The man collected the taxes, paid the Romans what he promised, and kept the remainder. Therefore, there was a lot of incentive for tax collectors to overcharge and cheat any way they could. It was pure profit for them. When a Jew entered the customs service, he was regarded as an outcast from society. He was disqualified as a judge or a witness in a court session, was excommunicated from the synagogue, and in the eyes of the community, his disgrace extended to his family. And he said to him, follow me. Understanding how almost everyone hated tax collectors, it is remarkable to see how Jesus loved and called Levi. It was a well-placed love, because Levi responded to Jesus' invitation by leaving his tax-collecting business and following Jesus. In one way, this was more than a sacrifice. This was more of a sacrifice than some of the other disciples made. Peter, James, and John could more easily go back to their fishing business, but it would be hard for Levi to go back to tax collecting. Tax collectors' jobs were greatly sought after as a sure way to get rich quickly. As he was dining in Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners also sat together with Jesus and his disciples. Most people consider this a going-away party Levi threw for his friends upon leaving the tax-collecting business. Jesus sat and ate with tax collectors and sinners, and eating at the same table with people was a sign of friendship and relationship. Here lies the scandal. Jesus was the friend of sinners. Of course, the sinners knew this and responded to Jesus' love and friendship, for there were many, and they followed him. Yeah, and I think that's a good reminder to us to be friends of sinners, as Jesus was. Why do the disciples of John and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? The Pharisees were well known for fasting twice a week. It made sense for the disciples of John to fast because his ministry stressed repentance. Yet Jesus and his disciples do not have the same emphasis on fasting as these other spiritual men. God is not against fasting, he is for fasting, but fasting has its time and place in the Christian life. Most of us have no time or no place for fasting, and so we are out of balance. These questions came from the other side. By using the illustration of a wedding, the bridegroom, Jesus drew on a powerful picture among the Jews. During the week-long wedding celebration, rabbis declared that joy was more important than observing religious rituals. In the days of Jesus, some rabbis declared that if the observance of any law came in the way of having a good time during a wedding, you didn't have to keep the law. You could just go and have a good time. Marriage feasts were times of extraordinary festivity and even of riot among several people of the East. Jesus' message was bold and clear. I'm not like the Pharisees or John the Baptist. I am the Messiah, the bridegroom to the people of God. Wherever I am, it is appropriate to have the joy we associate with weddings. The days will come, and they will fast in those days. Jesus knew his physical immediate presence would not always be with the disciples. When he was physically gone, it would be more appropriate to fast. Yeah, and here Jesus prophesies that he's not always going to be there, for one, and he would precede the disciples in death. So, then you have the unshrunk cloth on an old garment and the new wine in old wineskins here. The danger of trying to put something new on something old is clear, in the illustration of a garment and its patch. But the same principle was true for wineskins. A wineskin expanded under the pressure of fermentation, so if new and unfermented wine was put in an old brittle wineskin, it was sure to burst. Jesus' point was made clear by these examples. You can't fit his new life into the old forms. Jesus traded fasting for feasting, sackcloth and ashes for a robe of righteousness, a spirit of heaviness for a garment of praise, mourning for joy, and law for grace. Through the centuries, old rigid forms could rarely contain the work of the Holy Spirit. Through the generations, God often looks for new wineskins, because the old ones won't stretch any further. Jesus came to introduce something new, not to patch up something old. This is what salvation is all about. In doing this, Jesus doesn't destroy the old, but he fulfills it. Just as an acorn is fulfilled when it grows into an oak tree, there's a sense in which the acorn is gone, but its purpose is fulfilled in greatness. Yeah. His disciples began to pluck heads of grain. There was nothing wrong with what they did, because their gleaning was not considered stealing. The issue was only the day on which they did it. The rabbis made an elaborate list of do's and don'ts relevant to the Sabbath, and this violated one of the items on the list. When the disciples began to pluck the heads of grain on the Sabbath, in the eyes of the religious leaders, they were guilty of 4 violations of the Sabbath. They violated traditions against reaping, threshing, winnowing, and preparing food. At this time, rabbis filled Judaism with elaborate rituals related to the Sabbath and the observance of other laws. Ancient rabbis taught that on the Sabbath, a man could not carry something in his right hand or in his left hand, across his chest or on his shoulder. But you could carry something with the back of your hand, with your foot, with your elbow, or in your ear, your hair, or the hem of your shirt, or your shoe, or your sandal. Or on the Sabbath you were forbidden to tie a knot, except a woman could tie a knot in her girdle. So if a bucket of water had to be raised from a well, you could not tie a rope to the bucket, but a woman could tie her girdle to the bucket. So, some fancy rule breaking there. Yeah, and I think you see the same thing today with other Sabbath rituals where you have things like elevator mode on Sabbath mode on an elevator, where it just stops at every floor so they don't have to push the button. And you have neighbors Jewish people going to their neighbor's house to use their ovens type thing. So it's not their oven that they're using. Regarding this, have you never read what David did? In referring to David's use of the holy bread, in 1 Samuel 21, 1-6, Jesus showed an important principle. Human need is more important than religious ritual. The Sabbath was meant to serve man. This is exactly what many people steeped in tradition simply cannot accept, that what God really wants is mercy before sacrifice, that love to others is more important than religious rituals, that the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. These, O God, you will not despise. In the days of Abiathar the high priest. Some find a problem here because according to 1 Samuel 21:1, it says that Ahimelech was the high priest at that time, and that his son Abiathar served as high priest after him. Most people reconcile 1 Samuel 21:1 with Jesus' statement here by saying that both father and son together served as co-high priests at that time, or by saying that Jesus simply said this happened in the days of Abiathar, that is, while he was alive, not while he held the office of high priest. Wiersbe had a different solution. Also, it is likely that our Lord used Abiathar to refer to the Old Testament passage about Abiathar rather than to the man. This is the way the Jews identified sections of the word, since their manuscripts did not have chapters and verses, such as we have today in our Bibles. Interesting. Then you have Jesus here, healing the man with the withered hand. The critics of Jesus expected him to heal this man with the withered hand. By their expectation, they admitted Jesus had the power of God to work miracles. Knowing this, they watched him closely so that they might accuse him. They knew what Jesus could do, yet their knowledge didn't draw them to Jesus. It was as if a man could fly, but the authorities wanted to know if he had a pilot's license. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? In his question to the religious leaders, Jesus emphasized the truth about the Sabbath. There is never a wrong day to do something truly good. Stretch out your hand. In this, Jesus commanded the man with withered hand to do something impossible, to move his paralyzed hand. But as the man put forth effort, God did the rest. God never commands us without enabling us. This man might have reasoned thus: Lord, my hand is withered. How then can I stretch it out? Make it whole first, and afterwards I will do as thou commandest. This may appear reasonable, but in his case it would have been foolishness. At the command of the Lord he made the effort, and in making it, the cure was effected. Carrying on here, Psalm chapter 36, verses 1-12. For the music director, written by the Lord's servant David, an oracle. An evil man is rebellious to the core. He does not fear God, for he is too proud to recognize and give up his sin. The words he speaks are sinful and deceitful. He does not care about doing what is wise and right. He plans ways to sin while he lies in bed. He is committed to a sinful lifestyle. He does not reject what is evil. O Lord, your loyal love reaches to the sky, your faithfulness to the clouds. Your justice is like the highest mountains, your fairness like the deepest sea. You preserve mankind in the animal kingdom. How precious is your loyal love, O God! The human race finds shelter under your wings. They are filled with food from your house, and you allow them to drink from the river of your delicacies. For you are the one who gives and sustains life. Extend your loyal love to your faithful followers, and vindicate the morally upright. Do not let arrogant men overtake me, or let evil men make me homeless. I can see the evildoers. They have fallen. They have been knocked down and are unable to get up. Yeah, so lots of Psalms about putting our faith and trust in the Lord, and that whereas the wicked fall and don't get up again, the righteous rise again. There is no fear of God before the wicked man's eyes. This may be obvious, but it is often forgotten. The foundation of the wicked man's character and deeds is a lack of the fear of God. He does not respect or reverence God as he should. He flatters himself in his own eyes. The wicked man lowers his estimation of God and raises his estimation of himself. He thinks of himself much more highly than he should, both in regard to his sin, his iniquity, and his prejudices, his hates. He had not God before his eyes in holy awe, therefore he put himself there in unholy, therefore he puts himself there in unholy admiration. He who makes little of God makes much of himself. They who forget adoration fall into adulation. The eyes must see something, and if they admire not God, they will flatter self. From Spurgeon. Yeah. He devises wickedness on his bed, which notes that he does it constantly and unweariedly, preferring it before his own rest, earnestly and seriously, when his mind is freed from all outward distractions, and wholly at leisure to attend the business about which it is employed, and freely from his own inclination, when none are present to provoke him to it. The evil person is not merely drifting into evil ways, he's inventing ways to do it, in contrast to the godly who spend the wakeful hours of the night meditating on God and his commandments. Your mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens. We sense that David has thought long enough about the wicked man. Now he turns to the great mercy and faithfulness of Yahweh, the covenant God of Israel. Yeah. And I think this is important to recognize, both of these facts. That is, the sinfulness of man and the fallenness of our world, and the greatness of God. Not to overly focus on one and lose the other, and thereby become cynical, or to overly focus on God's mercy and love, and therefore become ignorant and naive. But to hold both, that we're sinners, yes, but we have a merciful, loving God who sent his Son as a sacrifice for us. So, the merciful God is a place of rest and protection for the people of God. God invites all among the children of men to find this refuge of trust in him. Continue your loving kindness to those who know you. Having received the good mercy and righteousness of God, David rightly prays that it would continue for himself and all those who know God in right relationship. Okay, and finally here, Proverbs chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise child makes a father rejoice, but a foolish child is a grief to his mother. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from mortal danger. Yeah, wisdom is good. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit. That is, if you're going around stealing or looting, ultimately it won't profit you. Sure, there might be some temporal gain for a period of time, but just as easily as it was got by the person who looted it, so too it can be lost, and often is lost in the company of thieves. Right, but righteousness delivers from mortal danger. That is, what will actually preserve your life is righteousness. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.